afternoon. Today I want to talk about the real world case of economic policy. And my name is Leila Ishikawa. And in my part, I want to talk about the Trump tariff and the reciprocal tariff announced by the Trump administration in April. These tariffs affect nearly every country, with Taiwan receiving a temporary reduction from 32% to 10%. Let's explore how this decision affects trade, currency, and economic outcomes, starting with some basics. So firstly, what is the tariff? Tariff is tax on imports. It raises the prices of foreign goods to protect domestic industry. Our reciprocal tariff is a tit-for-tat response. It's like the mirroring their trade barriers. So if one country imposes a tariff, the other does the same. So now that we understand the terminology, let's look at how the policy affects Taiwan's trade with the U.S. So how will reciprocal tariff directly affect Taiwan's export to the United States and imports? When a tariff were imposed, Taiwan's export to the U.S. drop, but U.S. buys face higher prices for Taiwanese goods. And at the same time, Taiwanese import from the U.S. If Taiwan imposes a reciprocal 10% tariff on the U.S. good, it also reduces the Taiwan's imports from the U.S. This means less trade between the two countries overall. And what is the nominal exchange rate and how will it be affected? The nominal exchange rate is the price of the one currency in terms of another. Here is it how many new Taiwan dollars per one US dollar, per one US dollars. And so we can use the simple graph of Taiwan foreign exchange, nominal exchange rate graph. And the vertical line is the nominal exchange rate. And then the horizontal line is quantity of US dollars. And this is the supply card, and this is the demand card. And demand for the US dollar falls because Taiwan is buying fewer US goods, and supply of US dollar also falls because the US is buying fewer Taiwanese exports. But in this case, if the supply drops more than the demand card, the US becomes more expensive, and the new Taiwan dollar weakens. So what does this mean is that because the Taiwan exports more to the US than in imports, the supply of USD decreased more significantly than demand. So this leads to the higher nominal exchange rate, meaning the US dollar is appreciated, but and the new Taiwan dollar depreciated. So let's move on to the next question. How will this reciprocal tariff directly affect the United States' next export? So President Trump's goal with this tariff was to boost the net export. That is to sell more abroad than the US buys. But here's what actually happened is that exports fall because Taiwan retaliated, and as the US appreciates, US goods become more expensive abroad. Meanwhile, imports may not fall much. They might even increase due to the stronger dollars. So instead of improving the trade balance, the US likely end up with lower net export. So because of the lower export and the import might not change, so US trade balance is worsens. So what is the real exchange rate and how is it affected? The real exchange rate means that just the nominal exchange rate for price levels. It reflects the relative price of domestic goods in terms of foreign goods. And the formula of real exchange rate is nominal exchange rate times domestic price divided with foreign price. And we can use this simple graph as well. And the vertical line is real exchange rate, and then the horizontal line is quantity of USD exchange into the foreign currency, and as the same, the supply part and demand part. So the demand for US dollar drops because foreigners are buying fewer US exports. However, the US still appreciate, mostly due to the reduced supply of US dollars overseas. In this case, the real exchange rate to rise, which means US goods become more expensive to foreigners and exports fall even further. In this graph, it seems that exchange rate is decreased, but actually the US dollar is appreciating. Overall, this makes the US good more expensive globally, worsening the next export and increasing the real exchange rate. So how does this all add up in the end? Is despite good intentions, the reciprocal tariff policy backfired. Taiwan and other countries retaliate, and the US dollar is appreciated. US goods becomes less competitive, and next export is falling. So in short, Trump policy likely worsened the trade balance instead of improving it. This is my part. This is the end of my part. Thank you so much.
So I'm Winnie from ICI. Now I'll be responsible for the part 2. So let's talk about the question first. So according to the Nevada CEO Jason Huang, he stated that Taiwan is now at the center of AI. So his statement is supported by the significant increase in Taiwan's semiconductor export to the United States and the other country in 2024. Nevada and AMD, two global leaders in AI-related technologies, announced plans to establish overseas headquarters and R&D centers in Taiwan. Additionally, many foreign investors purchased shares of TSMC. As a result, Taiwan's economy experienced substantial growth in 2024. So I will talk about the related question about this statement, and it's mostly about the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model. So the first question, how would the increase in Taiwan's semiconductor export to the United States and the rest of the world affect Taiwan's real GDP and overall price level in the short run? So the answer is, increase in the semiconductor export will raise Taiwan's both GDP and the price level in the short run. This is because that exports are a component of aggregate demand. So look at this picture. The vertical line will be the price level, and horizontal will be the real GDP. So the gray line will be the original line. So you can see that the red dot is the first equilibrium. And since the export is a component of the aggregate demand, so the increase of it will shift rightward of the aggregate demand curve. So it will lead to the second equilibrium point. And as you can see in the picture, it will both increase the real GDP and the price level. So the second question, what type of investment is the construction of overseas headquarters and RT centers by NVIDIA and AMD? So this construction is classified as the FDI, foreign direct investment. This is also classified into investment in GDP. This is because that company establishing a physical presence in another country. So by setting up a facilities or an office or the factories will be classified into this category. And the second question, how will this construction affect Taiwan's real GDP and the overall price level in the short run? So we said this will be included in the aggregate demand in the investment of the GDP equation. So in the short run, it will lead to a higher real GDP and price level. So it will be the second term of the question 1. So you can see that it both increase the real GDP and the price level. This is the same picture, the same way. So question 3. What type of investment is the purchase of TSMC shares by a foreign investor? So this purchase of TSMC will be classified into portfolio investment because it involves in buying financial asset rather than gaining control during the other company. So it's different from the FDI in the previous question because this one, it didn't cause any direct influence on the foreign company. So What do I think? Do I expect this type of investment to directly affect Taiwan's aggregate demand in the short run? So, I don't think this kind of portfolio investment will directly increase the aggregate demand, as it only involves some transfer of the ownership rather than a new spending on goods or services. So, what impact will it have on Taiwan's real GDP and overall price level in the short run? So, since it didn't cause any direct influence or impact on it, I don't think this type of investment will directly impact Taiwan's real GDP and overall price level either. Let's go to the first question. So if the Taiwanese government take no action in response of the AI-driven economic growth, how will Taiwan real GDP and overall price level change in the long run? So as the demand is keep increasing, but the Taiwan government didn't do anything, it will maybe lead to a shortage to the labor or energy. So look at the picture. So as he said, the gray line will be the original aggregate demand and aggregate supply. At first, the demand will be increased and cause to the second equilibrium point. However, since it will cause a shortage to the labor or energy, so the short run aggregate supply will shift leftward. This will cause the GDP only have a little increase. However, it will cause the price level to significantly increase, since the shortage will cause there's not enough supply for the demand. So if Taiwan's government didn't do any action, it will cause only a little to the output. So the 5th question, if the Taiwanese government is concerned about an overheated economy, for example, the asset bubbles in the stock or housing market driven by the AI boom, what type of fiscal and monetary policy could be implemented to cool down the economy? So this one fiscal policy tool and one monetary tools, and explain how they can each reduce the real GDP and the overall price level. So to cool down an overheated economy, the government can use, for the fiscal tool, I think they can reduce the government spending, by cutting some public expenditure. They can lower the overall aggregate demand. So it helps to slow down the economic overheating and reduce the inflationary pressure. Or they can also increase tax. So raising taxes can reduce disposable income and business profit, leading to a lower consumption and investing spending. So why is this fiscal policy tool effective? So this will reduce demand in the economy. Shift an 80 curve leftward, which will lower both the real GDP growth and the price level in the short run. And for the monetary policy tools, I think you can increase the interest rate. The central bank will raise policy interest rates to make borrowing money more expensive. So a higher rate will discourage consumer spending and business investment. So it will reduce the aggregate demand. And also it can reduce the money supply. So through an open market operation, the central bank can sell government bonds to absorb liquidity. So tightening the credit condition is slowing the economic activity. So why is this monetary policy tool effective? So it both can reduce the consumption and investment. So it shifts the 80 curve leftward. So it will lower inflation and lower the GDP growth. So this is the end of my part. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Julie, and my part is part 3. So the first question is, how will these budget cuts directly influence aggregates demand in Taiwan, and how will changes in aggregate demand affect real GDP and the overall price level in Taiwan in the short run, and provide both descriptive and graphical analysis. So when the government spends less money, it directly reduces one part of the total demand in the economy, and this causes the demand curve, the aggregate demand, to move to the left from 81 to 82. And as demand drops, the total amount of goods and services, or called the real GDP, falls. Prices also go down, and you can see that the price level goes from E1 to E2, and the real GDP also decreases. Do you expect a multiplier effect to result from decrease in government spending, and explain how the multiplier effect arises and how it can amplify the impacts of the initial budget cuts on the economy? I predict that there will be like the multiplier effects, means that a small drop in government spending can cause a bigger drop in the economy. And when the government cuts spending, businesses earn less. They might pay workers or less or hire less workers, and then those people have less money to spend. So other businesses also earn less. And this continues in many cycles, making the economy shrink more than the original cuts. The more people spend, the higher MPC, the stronger the multiplier effects. Because you can see the multiplier formula equals to 1 divided by 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume. 3. How will these budget cuts directly affect public saving? What will be the effects on demand and supply in Taiwan's loanable funds market? How will the real interest rates, private investment, private saving, and national saving be affected? If the government spends less but still collects the same amount of taxes, it saves more. And this is called the higher public saving. The more saving means more money is available to lend. The supply of money in the loanable fund market increases. So the supply moves from S1 to S2, means that the quantity of loanable funds increases from E1 to E2. And with the real interest rate decreases by an amount. So the interest rates go down, borrowing becomes cheaper, so private investment increases. People may also save up, but this is ambiguous. And total national saving goes up as the private saving, as the saving goes up. Based on your analysis in question 3, what will happen to Taiwan's net capital outflow? Provide both descriptive and graphical explanations. So lower interest rates in Taiwan make saving money there less attractive. So investor may move money abroad to earn more, and this increase Taiwan's net capital outflow because more money going out than coming in. And this is the graph. You can see that the movement along the NCO curve, the net capital outflow curve, from point E1 to E2, with more money falling out at the interest rate decreases. How will the change in net capital outflow affect the supply of new Taiwan dollars in the foreign currency exchange market? And use a graphical analysis to show the impacts on the real exchange rates and Taiwan's trade balance. As more money move out of Taiwan, the more new Taiwan dollars are sold to buy foreign currency, and this increases the supply of Taiwan new dollar in the exchange market. More supply makes the Taiwan dollar weaker compared to other currencies, so the new Taiwan dollar is having a depreciation. This make Taiwan's goods cheaper for foreigners and imports more expensive. And this helps Taiwan export more and import less. increasing the net export. A graph will show that the supply curve will move rightward and indicating a higher quantity of new Taiwan dollar exchange from E1 to E2 with the decreased real exchange rate from E1 to E2. So the last one, based on your previous analysis in question 3 and 5, how will these budget cuts indirectly influence Taiwan's aggregate demand? By summarizing the direct effects of reduced government spending, the multiplier effects, and the indirect effects via the loanable funds and foreign exchange market, do you expect aggregate demand in Taiwan to increase or decrease as a result of the budget cuts? So putting all together, we have the direct impacts from the government spending would decrease aggregate demand, and the multiplier effects make the aggregate demand fall even more. Lower interest rates increase investment, helping to also rise the aggregate demand. And a weaker new Taiwan dollar increases export, also helping to rise the aggregate demands. So the aggregate demand in Taiwan is expected to decrease overall because the good effects made of the investment and export are smaller than the bad one, the cut spending and multiplier. So the aggregate demand in Taiwan is expected to decrease overall at the results of the legislative yuan's budget cuts, and the indirect positive effects and the economy will shrink in the short run. Thank you.